Tonight, we're having a panel discussion on women in photography. And we have kind of an assortment of organizations, both geographically and focus-wise, whether it is geography specific or process specific, if they're focused on commercial or artistic photography. This obviously is not an exhaustive group of organizations that are focused on women in photography, but for tonight, which is, we only have an hour and a half, it's a pretty well-rounded group. And we will kind of be sharing some other groups at the end that we're kind of following or that we would like to recommend as well. So I guess that's it for the intro. We're each going to do a short presentation of our organization, and then we're going to do a discussion and then open it up to the audience for questions. So that's kind of the structure for this evening, and we can just launch right into it. We're going to do it alphabetically by organization. So Veronica from Foto Feminas is going to go first. So if you want to take it over, it's all you, Veronica.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the invitation and to be here this evening. Also talking with Virginia, Mara, and Haley. This is really exciting. So I'm just gonna share my screen so everyone can see. So I am Veronica. I am the founder and curator of Foto Feminas. Foto Feminas started in 2015 as an online platform, which is basically in the form of a website, and it started with the incentive of promoting Latin American and Caribbean women photographers. This is something I started online, but has sort of like with time evolved into other chapters. But essentially, I mean, you can find on the website all the publications that I have done, which is one photographer per month, where I choose one project and I curate, edit that one project. The site is bilingual in English and Spanish, just to create more accessibility. But every single publication is on the website per year. Then 2016, when I lived in Hong Kong, I started to also gather the actual physical books of Latin American women photographers. There is a reference online where you can find the name of the photographer, and if you're interested in buying, you can buy directly to the photographer. Then I've done a couple of interviews with two women photographers that I think that I like a big reference for Latin American photography. So that's sort of archived there. And then, yeah, we're an open submission called The Whole Time, with no theme or anything like that. And then our most recent project, which is started this year, is the portfolio review, which is calling people to apply and to receive feedback with the reviewers. And the reviewers are photographers from the Foto Feminas community. So where we're looking is to kind of like continue having a sort of connection with younger practitioners and with contemporary women photographers working in Latin America and the Caribbean. So that's sort of like the connection. And yeah, I mean, this is one space that, I mean, everything is started here online, but we continue doing other things offline too. And of course, it's always so important. And yeah, and this is us. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Veronica. And I apologize, I think I pluralized photo in your name before when I introduced Foto Feminas, so singular. All right, so Haley, you're up next from 100 Heroines.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley. I'm so excited to be here. It is 11 o'clock my time, so apologies if I'm a little sleepy and struggling to articulate myself. But I'm really happy to have been invited to join all of you this evening, these amazing organizations, and just learning more about what else everyone else is doing. Let me share my screen and share this. So I am a historical researcher for an arts charity called 100 Heroines. So we're the only UK charity dedicated to promoting women in photography. And we do this in a variety of ways. And we began as an online community, essentially. And then now most of what we do is in person, and we have a physical space now. So our kind of long-term goal is to become the first museum of women in photography. So we have a space which we've kind of just moved into within since July, so it's all pretty fresh and new, but we're really excited about this. And we promote women historical photographers, which is where most of my work and knowledge is, but we also promote established contemporary photographers, and then also we aim to support emerging artists. And we do that in a variety of ways, first of which is providing free exhibitions. So at the moment, we have a few exhibitions on. One is Astro 2030 by Mexican-British artist Monica Alcazar Duarte, which is this incredible installation. This is taken from the doorway. It's kind of completely black, and you have this, what she calls a satellite, that you can interact with the images. And she has this app you can use in your phone. It's really kind of unique and exciting. Another exhibition we have on at the moment is by Paula Paredes, an Ecuadorian photographer, and this is a series called Skin Deep, in which she's celebrating and highlighting the experience of the LGBT community in Ecuador. And then we also have an exhibition on by an Indian photographer, Anita Kamka, which is following the experience of Indian activist Lakshmi. So we're really excited to be able to provide free exhibitions and to also, make people aware of these contemporary photographers, because the name 100 Heroines comes initially from our director kind of being approached, and someone said, I can't even name one woman photographer, and she said, but I can name at least 100. And so we've been finding, initially just the first 100, and we continue to promote and write about and exhibit as many women photographers as we can, really, as well as doing exhibitions of contemporary photographers. We invest in legacy heroines, we call them, so historical photographers. So in April of this year, we acquired our first photographic archive, and these are a few images from that archive. This is of a photographer called Elizabeth Buchmeyer Lewis. It's originally from Germany, but settled and lived in England. And she was teacher to photographer Sunil Gupta. And she's virtually unknown. And so by acquiring her archive, we're trying to preserve and promote her legacy, which is incredibly exciting. We also invest a lot in public engagement, so not just providing free exhibitions and promoting established artists, but in encouraging our communities around us. So we're based in Gloucester, UK. So we want to encourage, our community there to, engage in art themselves and to make their own photography. And so we have a couple of projects, which is where we have organized groups of women to go out on the streets and take some street photography. And these are some of the products of that, which I think are pretty impressive given they're all amateurs. And so you can follow that project on Instagram at Gloucesterama. Another project we like to collaborate with heritage partners. So Museum of Gloucester we work with a lot. And at the moment we're doing a project called 100 by 100, in which we're photographing 100 women in Gloucester, and they're being photographed by 100 local women photographers. This is one of my favorite photos to come from that series so far. So that's a little bit about what we do. We're always looking for people to get involved, to volunteer with us, to exhibit with us and so forth. So you can find out about us on Instagram and Twitter at 100 Heroines. And you can explore our website as well at 100heroines.org, although it's being refurbished. So I find it a bit hard to navigate. So forewarning, but we are working on that. But yeah, thank you.
Well, it sounds like your website is probably packed with stuff. You guys have a lot going on. So if it's a little hard to navigate right now, that sounds like it's probably understandable.
It's a good problem to have, I guess.
Yeah. No, there's a lot there. So that's really great. Next, we're going to hear from Mara from Silverwater Collective. So you're up.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Let me scroll up. There we go. Okay. So my name is Mara. I am the founder, one of the curators, and an artist in the Silverwater Collective, which is a group of 10 female photographers from across the United States and Canada. We met during our MFA in photography from the Savannah College of Art and Design, and we met during our courses in 2020 virtually. So we are from across, we have members that are outside of St. Louis and in Tampa, Florida, and in Nashville, Tennessee, and Savannah, Georgia, and Chicago, and Toronto, Canada, and New York, and Washington, DC, and then myself, who's outside of Detroit. And so our work transcends a lot of different types of subject areas, but we do have commonalities between us. Our mission is to exist to support women in the specialized field of photography and to build a sense of community that is not constrained by geography, background, or ideology, and to act as a springboard for ideas that stimulate and inspire one another in our creative endeavors. And so we have, in the short time that we've been together, almost all of us have graduated, so that's nice. And then we have been essentially putting our work out there in as many different ways as possible. So in the past year, we did a few exhibitions. So we have exhibited at the Contact Photography Festival in Toronto as a whole group, and then recently we are currently exhibiting. Actually, it just finished up at Patch in Remington, which is outside of Marcellus, Michigan, which is our current exhibition called Sterling Presence Redux. We also are very consistently putting our work out there. So currently 4 of our members are in the top 200 for the Foto Lucida Critical Mass, which we're very excited about. And our general vibe is to try to support each other and push each other as much as possible throughout the creation of our own work, but also to support other women as well. So we have run portfolio reviews often to help support others. We're definitely reaching out as much as possible, but we're also very much at the beginning of our process of being together as a collective and as a group. And so our push at this point is to grow as much as possible and to support each other as we launch pad our careers. So that is our information.
Great. Thanks, Mara. All right, Virginia, you're up next.
Kia ora. My name's Virginia. I'm calling in from Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand. And I am the founder and curator of Women in Photography, New Zealand and Australia. So I will just share my screen. I've got lots of exclamation marks for some reason.
Do you want me to get your Instagram up?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
For some reason it's not letting me get from this end.
All right, give me 1 second.
Apologies, everybody. It's nice to see some people who are here from Aotearoa and Australia. So hello, and everybody else. And it's really lovely to meet Hayley and Maura and Veronica. Okay.
All right, you guys can see that, right?
Yeah. So Women in Photography New Zealand and Australia was founded at the very end of 2018. And a strange tie-in is one of the first takeovers that we ever did actually was with 100 Heroines, actually featured Women in Photography New Zealand and Australia, where I introduced a number of artists. So we are predominantly online with just Instagram at this point, website underway. But the idea is to engage, connect, collaborate, and debate with female and non-binary photo-based artists working in this region or from this region. So you don't have to, I'm not from New Zealand, but I am based here. And we work with artists who are actually from New Zealand and Australia who are based in other parts of the world as well. This is predominantly an art-based platform. So we don't tend to share the work of commercial photographers. But the idea is that instead of it just being a place where you show a portfolio of images and put up sort of, you know, abstract comments, that it's actually a space that's creating an archive for this part of the world. So the artists have the opportunity to work with me in the lead up to their takeovers. And it's very much the process of like an online artists talk. So we're interested in getting into the why an artist actually makes the work that they do, be that one specific project or an overarching look at their practice. And the idea is to create a space where curators, writers, other artists from anywhere in the world can come and see the kind of work that's being made in this part of the world. Because I felt that that was really important, that there was a sort of global platform, and Instagram seemed like the most logical one at that point, for us to share our work to a wider audience. This isn't necessarily a platform for you don't have to be a fully fledged full-time artist, or you don't have to be you know, very far into your career. Really, it's being able to talk about your work. So there is definitely the need to be able to discuss your work, the themes and the whys and the wherefores. But if you want to scroll down, Dale, then you can just kind of see the way that it works. So we've managed to create this amazing archive, which I'm really proud of, and I really enjoy working with all of the artists. So if you're from New Zealand or Australia, or you're based here and you're interested, it's an open submission process. You can just get in touch, and I can send you information on how you would make a submission, and then we go from there. Thank you.
Do you want me to keep scrolling, or is that a good
Yeah,
sampling?
you can. I mean, there's quite a lot of takeovers now. They tend to run for 3 days at a time. We share, the artist shares 8 posts. I do an introduction, and yeah, it's just I think it's a beautiful feed with a real variety of work in there, from artists who are completely dedicated. Well, I mean, all of the artists are actually dedicated to their practice, but it's giving that space where people can talk with confidence about their work and get feedback from both myself and the community. So throughout the takeovers, I ask questions of the artists, yeah, about what they're talking about, to try and tease out more information. We have had some real world exhibitions and projects that have come from the sort of exposure that the feed has got, which is fantastic. And we're looking to move into more sort of real world events as well. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks, Virginia. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my organization. So some of you in the audience, if you know me, you probably know me from the Halide Project, which is a nonprofit that I started in Philly in 2015. But this year I started a new initiative called Lux et Libera. And go back to the screen share to flip from that to this. Yeah, and the focus, so you can see it's women at the intersection of light and chemistry, and our focus is on women and female identifying artists who are working in film and historic or alternative process photography. That's my love. That's kind of what inspires just about everything I do. So it's coming from a place of both recognition of the women who are working in these processes, but also trying to create more opportunities for them, for us. So we've done this panel discussion focused on organizations with us as a part of it. We also did a panel discussion in conjunction with the Auckland Festival of Photography that featured several artists who talked about their own work. We have an exhibition up at the Halide Project in conjunction with the 2020 Photo Festival. It's up now through mid-October, and it features the work of 8 artists from the Philly area who are working in film and historic processes. And so that's this exhibition right here. The artists are listed out here if you'd like to see their names. I also, a few months, started doing a work share, which I think I'm going to do every month. It's not a critique, a strict critique. It's more of just a gathering where women who are working in film and historic processes can bring their work and share it with whoever else shows up that evening, and either just present it for the sake of sharing and getting more eyes on it, or to get feedback from their peers. So that's something we're doing virtually every month now going forward. We do have an Instagram page, and I've been doing takeovers on Instagram, and I do them Monday through Friday, and it's usually a single artist. Every once in a while, I'll do artists that have something in common. Like I went to the Wet Plate Jamboree back in August, and a week after that, I did one day dedicated to 5 different female artists who were at the Jamboree doing wet plate photography and showing what images they created while they were there. What else? I did launch a fundraising campaign, print sale based campaign that's still up now. There's still a few prints available, but just to support abortion access after Roe v. Wade got overturned. So there is an activism side to what I would like to do with this initiative as well. And I think my long-term goal, actually, somewhat similar to 100 Heroines, maybe not a museum per se, but a brick and mortar photo center dedicated to women who are working in film and alternative processes, where there would be space for workshops, residency program, and then dark rooms for the people who live on site to work in themselves. So that's kind of the long-term goal for this initiative. And I think that's about it. Yeah, and this is just sharing the work of some of the artists who've been a part of some of the events we've done thus far. And I'll keep adding to this homepage as we do more events. Okay, so I think that's it for that. I guess a good idea would be for everyone who's on the panel to take a second to put their either website and or Instagram handle or social media in the chat. so that the people who are attending can see that. My chat keeps disappearing. There it is. All right, so everyone's got theirs in there. It's a little bit of a mishmash, but people can find what they're looking for in there. So for a little bit of a discussion amongst ourselves, I think some of us sort of touched upon what motivated the initial creation of our organizations, but if anybody didn't mention that or wanted to go in a little more deeply into why you created your organization or the organization was created, what gap you were looking to fill or what have you, feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in.
I can start. Okay, so initially speaking, the Silverwater Collective came from a distinct desire that I had to make friends. I really wanted to connect with other women artists who were working actively. And when I left my BFA program, I realized that pretty much everybody kind of just drops off, right? You leave an art program, you're all together, everybody's hanging out, everybody's making work, you're all feeding off of each other. And then all of a sudden you're in your studio and you're just making work by yourself and everybody's gone, right? And yeah, you might have friends that you see every once in a while, but you guys are kind of all doing your own thing. And so when I was going into my MFA program, I really wanted to be intentional about making sure that as much as I could to not have that drop off happen. And the other component too was that because I was doing the virtual program, I was very, insulated anyway. I was the only person that I knew that was outside of Detroit that was doing this program together. And so I wanted to make sure that I figured if I felt that way, so did other people too. And so when I was in critique classes, I was paying attention to who was critiquing and how they were talking about work. And I was paying attention to what kind of work they had. And I kind of just was trying to look and see who I felt like had the same, this sounds so silly, but had the same vibe about art together. And then I just emailed them and I asked if they wanted to make a photo girl super group, which is kind of hilarious to think about. And then after that point, it kind of all started rolling from there. And we realized that we were far apart, but we could do things together. And really in the weirdest way with the pandemic, with the onset of doing so many things virtual, it was the only way that we could make this happen. We are nowhere near each other geographically most of the time. And some of us are in different time zones and different things are always going on, but we have a centralized base that's online. But it was all really based off of wanting that sense of community and pushing to be intentional about it.
Yeah, I'd say from my perspective, it's interesting hearing you say sort of wanting community or friends, Mari. Yeah, that was definitely, I was sort of, New Zealand and Australia are remote. We're remote countries. Yeah, we're sort of cut off from a lot of other parts of the world. And within New Zealand, the gallery scene is quite small. The art scene is quite small. And I had done some teaching at tertiary level for first year students, and was sort of seeing all of these amazing female photographers, going through the program, and then all of them just seemed to, I was just like, where does everybody go? Because there were so few spaces for people to show. And I've really enjoyed the discussions with the sort of younger artists, and I just sort of thought I suppose it came out of a curiosity. One, I wanted to create more of a community to know who was out there, but also I thought there was a real benefit to having a platform that was purely for this part of the purely for this part of the world, because I'd be talking to people overseas and sort of saying, oh, there's this amazing photographic art scene over here, but I couldn't point them to a space. And so I just sort of thought, I'm just going to create something. So it was a real sort of like knee-jerk thing. I was just like, right, I'm setting up an Instagram platform and I'm going to do it. And then it's like, oh, I've done it. Now I'm going to actually have to do it. And decided to include Australia. And we do work with artists from the Pacific Islands. I think now in sort of retrospect, that knee-jerk, if I'd actually sort of sat and thought for a little bit, I would have thought more possibly about the name. I would have thought more about, because the name both includes and excludes people, which is, problematic, even though the community doesn't. But yeah, it was curiosity, it was wanting community, it was wanting to give a platform for people to be able to share and engage with other people's work. And for me to get a real handle on, what has been made in this part of the world. And I've just been like blown away really by all of the people who I've met and the work that's been created. So it's kind of got a little bit of a life of its own. It's quite organic, but I really love that about it. So yeah.
It's amazing. I resonate with what both of you are saying. I'm not the founder of 100 Heroines, but I came to 100 Heroines during the first lockdown back in 2020. And I was searching for a community and also like something to do whilst I was in lockdown. But it was a community of, other women artists, but also, as a historian, I love researching dead people. And so it wasn't just this living community, but it was also a community of women who had come before me, who I had never been taught about. And so I was discovering photographers through my research like Claude Cahoon, and Mari Hoig was a photographer from Norway from like the 1890s. And she was this lesbian woman who was fighting for suffrage and taking gender bending photos of herself in her studio. And, that just completely contradicted what I had been taught about photography. And I worked in commercial photography for a while because being a historian doesn't pay very well. So I was doing that on the weekends. And I was surprised by the sexism that I experienced in the industry, and people saying things to me like, oh, isn't it nice that women can be in photography now? And my wondering, well, have we not always been here? And it was just so refreshing to discover 100 Heroines and to be shown that, yeah, like we actually have been here from the beginning. And, actually a woman made the first photo book, right? Anna Adkins, in that experimental process that Libera promotes. So yeah, I think that's just been so exciting, that community, but also that representation that I didn't know I needed.
Well, I just want to break in for 1 second and just note that on your website, you have that resource page that has profiles of women in photographic history. So I know like when I would have like down week from our takeovers, I would choose some women from history and do little takeovers by them on our Instagram. So that's a really great resource if people are looking to learn more about women in the history of photography. They have a great resource page on the site.
Yeah, thank you for that. So excited other people are enjoying it.
Yeah, for me, I started Foto Feminas really out of frustration, to be honest. It was pretty much, I felt very frustrated that it was so difficult to access information from Latin America, especially women and contemporary women. Like it was mostly like very well established photographers from Latin America, or either they were dead. And I just really felt like what's happening in terms of like contemporary, what kind of stories are they working on? Are they journalists or more conceptual? And I sort of had this broad interest of like what's happening in the region, like it's so large. And I always kind of felt like, we have the advantage that for the most part, we all speak the same language. and I always thought like, why is it so hard to access it? So I studied in the UK, and it was always like a natural thing for me to look into like what kind of photography occurred in Latin America. And I traveled to Latin America, and then I moved to New York, and I ended up working in ICP library as an archivist. And it was when I was at the library that I came across so much content that I really felt that urge that I had to do something about that personal frustration. And it was really looking at other, women's work, or perhaps collectives, or some were recent, some were not. And then I just was like, okay, I'm just gonna start it, like kind of like what Virginia said, like she started it, and then it's like, okay, this is now happening, it's live, I need to do it. And it sort of really evolved from that. I mean, it's kind of like a slow growth because it's only one feature per month. But then with time now, we are over 90 photographers feature, and we have created a community. And I mean, I feel like I've learned so much from finding their work, looking at the work, editing the work. And in so many levels, I feel like they have taught me a lot as well. So I just think it's just great to feel like you belong to a community, not only in the sense of feeling to be a company, but it's like what you learn in that process. At least for me, that's been the greatest side that I did not anticipate when I started Foto Feminas, to be fully honest. I didn't think I would learn so much from the community, and I'm just so happy for that.
Yeah, I feel like that's something everybody's touching on, is like that sense of community. Just feeling the need to like build a community that may not already exist. I wanted to share something really quick, which is part of what spurred me on to even think about starting an organization that was specific to women in photography. So I'm not sure where I initially came across this website, but they have this page of just data and stats with citations. So you can actually go and read the full articles, but it's about art more broad. It's not specific to photography, but there are just, all of these studies. And I think, Mara, you mentioned something about how, no, maybe it wasn't Mara. I forgot who said it. But someone said something about, when you're in school, there are a lot of women studying alongside with you, but it seems like once graduation happens, a lot of the women sort of fall to the wayside. Or actually, maybe Virginia, was that you? Someone was mentioning that, and it like the outlet for artistic work is limited. And if you look at these stats, I know I'm running through them really pretty quickly, but it just seems like the representation is not out there for women in the arts. So I came across that website and saw a lot of those stats, which I'd heard anecdotally before, but then seeing that there were studies that had been done and actual statistics to back up this anecdotal evidence that I had come across was really interesting. And then just, a few years ago, I started to sort of get a vibe from some, male people in the photo world that I hadn't really felt in a long time, if ever. And it was just a bit of like dismissiveness. And there's just, it seemed like an increasing kind of negative vibe. And so that kind of it spurred me on to, again, like build this community that was more open and not competitive too. Like that's another thing that I've come to realize a little bit kind of over time, more and more, that there's the people who I personally feel like I want to surround myself with are supportive of each other. And don't have that, it could be kind of friendly competition where you're actually trying to like bolster someone, but not a negative sort of competition. Um, so yeah, those two things kind of collided and made me want to start an organization that was more supportive of women in the arts. And with like alternative process photography, it's kind of interesting because there seem to be actually a lot of women who are kind of leading the charge in these alternative processes. There's a lot of experimentation going on. If you think of some of the better known artists and people who are writing books and showing and doing experimentation, a lot of them are women. So there's kind of like this interesting paradox where in this niche of photography, there are a lot of women who are visible, but in the overall kind of art world and also photography world, the opportunities and the recognition don't necessarily track. And again, it's that recognition and the opportunities are the big things that sort of drive Lux. And I think someone wanted that link in the chat, so I will put that in the chat now.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking when I was sort of how I was going to set this platform up. One of the main things, drivers towards Instagram or just a sort of social media platform, was that the accessibility to a lot of people, and that there wasn't that financial outlay for either myself, but the artists who were sharing their work, that there could be this conversation that would happen. And we could be, because yeah, we've shown work from artists who live in the most remote areas of Australia, yeah, but it gives them the opportunity to access our audience, to share their work and have their work discussed in a broader community, because yeah, we are so remote from one another here and from the rest of the world. Just feeling like you've been seen, I think is quite big. I really wanted visibility, was a really important thing for me, and I sort of, it's interesting when I sort of talk with artists about their bio, you know, because I need a bio so that I can write the introduction and everything. And you'll find some of the younger artists, or actually age has got nothing to do with it, to be honest. They'll say, I haven't really got one. And I said, well, you know, I'm not interested in what awards you've won and where you've exhibited. And yeah, that's not what this platform is about. It's not about sort of pumping up your, you know, this is what you've done and these are all of the accolades that you've had. I very rarely write about those. It's about why you're making the work that you're making, and we all have a why, and that's really interesting to us as artists. I mean, I love going to artist talks. I love hearing about the reasons and the challenges, and the, you know, these works aren't just created in a vacuum. You know, they're created in amongst jobs and children and family, and you know, all of the other things that will be in a mix of somebody's life. And it's giving visibility to the people who are making work that I just think is really, really interesting. So it was really important to me that people felt seen and heard, and that their work was discussed and valued outside of the context of a gallery. Yeah, so that was really important for me.
Dale, I think it's important too for us to like touch on or go back to like this idea of competition, because I think that women are so often put up against each other, right? And so there is such a huge sense of power to be held when we work together for a common goal. And so like in the case with Silverwater Collective, you know, we encourage each other to submit to the same things. We encourage each other to put things out. Like, we're working as a collective, but we're also working individually as artists at the same time, because we have the mindset that anything that anybody gets moves us forward. Anything that anybody pushes moves us forward, right? And so I'm 100% of the belief that I would rather get beat by somebody that I know in any kind of event. I look at gallery, you know, or who gets in exhibitions and stuff, and I'm trying to find people that I know on there because I'm excited for them, right? And I think that energy is the energy that we need to put out there. That competition, sure, like, yeah, that benefits maybe a couple of people, but ultimately speaking, when we work together, we grow together. And I think that that's a really important mindset to continue forward.
You're championing the work of others. No, it's that thing, if we all rise up together, as opposed to it just being a couple of people who float to the top and then just don't acknowledge everybody who's below them.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes when a couple people float to the top, it can feel like they're the token of whatever demographic they are part of. And so, right, like if there are more people of that group floating up, then it feels less like a token choice than actual like empowerment. And I feel strongly about like women being at the top and being in the decision-making position. So like women-owned galleries or in other initiatives that are spearheaded by women. So it's not always these men, often white men, who are making the choices, particularly if you look at that site and some of the stats, you know, who's in the curatorial positions at some of the best known institutions. So
I was thinking about this because I was interviewed by a guy once about women in photography, and he said sort of, when you look at the stats, don't you just sort of think, well, what's the point? And there's this like terminology which is called like hope punk, where you acknowledge what's the elephant in the room, which may be that women don't have the same, and non-binary artists don't have the same representation, but you still work to highlight people regardless of that. And so it's where you turn your gaze. If I spent all my time looking at those statistics, then there may be like a sense of hopelessness or helplessness, whereas like, because my gaze is on all of these amazing female and non-binary artists, then I think the future is really freaking bright. It's sort of like there's all of this amazing work being made, and I want to do everything that I can to be in that mix. I'm really proud to be in that mix, and to help people to realize, just because they haven't got a gallery show or this, that, and the other, doesn't mean that their work isn't valuable and valid. So, yeah.
Right. And there may be some people who look at the stats and are, kind of feel deflated, but then there are other people, like the people in this panel, who might see stats like that and it makes them fight. It makes them create something.
What's interesting about those stats is the Guerrilla Girls have been screaming about this for 30 years now, and the stats have not shifted that much. So we're actively having to work and move forward, but there is that component too, that people are drawing attention to this in kind of smaller, or not small, they are a big deal, right? So drawing attention to this in bigger ways, but also just like, I can understand where that like helplessness comes from, but the best way to combat that is to reach into your community.
Yeah, and make change, right? So again, it goes back to like women being on the forefront of making decisions within the art world. Yeah, I think that's huge.
And I think also like to keep producing work as well, because that's also kind of like, will push us to the top. Like if we kind of like silence our voices or stop producing, that's not going to help the change, I think. And that's, of course it is hard, but I also find like having a community motivates me to continue, because I feel like, oh, this is so worth it doing it. And I mean, in a very short life that we've had at Foto Feminas, I feel like I've seen so many changes within the Latin America contemporary community. Like now I see many collectives, whereas 5 years ago I didn't see. I'm also seeing them like getting grants or, you know, financial support from like international. So I think there is hope. It's just like a matter of keep producing and keep that good energy, like Mara was saying. And I think that sort of like bring us to the top, as opposed to certain people kind of like, yeah, always being there. At least that's kind of always been my motivation. Like, okay, it might not be immediate, but I feel like in 8 years that I've done Foto Feminas, I've definitely seen, at least in our region, that it's the only place that I can comment. I've definitely seen a change, yeah. And similar to Virginia, I've never asked like for which grants or which university did you go. All what I care about is it's the work. I think that has to resonate besides any awards or whatever. I don't know. For me, it's like that is the core of everything. And why are they doing it? And I want to learn more about their motivation and yeah. For me, that's just super inspiring.
So I think it might be a good idea to see if anyone in the audience has any questions. We don't have to stop at 7, obviously, if we're having a robust conversation. We could keep going. But if anyone does have questions, you can put them in the chat if you'd like, or there's a raise hand function that you can click on, and then you can, like, I'll allow you to unmute yourself. So you can ask with your voice.
Say to Hayley that I really like your 100 by 100 project. Yeah, that 100 women photographed by women, because yeah, there have been projects, some quite sort of high profile projects, book projects, yeah, where it's been photographing women, but the photographers and saying all the amazing work that they do, but the whole team behind it has been male. And I was just saying that that's missing a beat. You know, it's sort of, and so I really love that 100 Heroines seems to be about women, for women, by women. Is that like a key sort of tenet to 100 Heroines?
Yeah, that absolutely is. And I mean, that's something I love about the 100 by 100 project as well, because it's also not just, you know, famous established photographers. These are women who, you know, one of the photographers who took an image recently, she'd never done photography before, but she took this amazing image. And it also makes me think of, you know, all these photos we're seeing of the Queen, but a lot of the portraits being shared by like Cecil Beaton or other male photographers. When actually we have a local photographer to Gloucester, Dorothy Wilding, who took one of the first portraits of the Queen, you know, that actually inspired the stamp photograph. But nobody's really familiar with that photograph, and that's not what's being put in papers right now. And so just historically, women are lost so often, which is frustrating. But no, 100 Heroines is totally about women, for women. It's one question that I have maybe for the group is, you know, it's something I've been wrestling with, as I've encountered quite a lot in interviewing some of our artists, but also questions from the public. You know, one artist I was interviewing, she said, you know, I don't want to be called a woman photographer. I want to be called a photographer, right? Because I don't, you know, similar to Serena Williams saying, you know, I don't want to be the best women tennis player. I want to be the best tennis player, which I totally sympathize with that. And understand that. But I also wrestle with the idea that, like, yes, but also we're not there yet. In the sense of, I still find it really valuable for us to have organizations like all the ones that we're participating in that are promoting women photographers and non-binary photographers. But I wondered what your thoughts were about this. Do you think it's harmful to reduce women photographers to women photographers as opposed to photographers, and how do we deal with that?
I mean, I understand that mindset. I used to photograph tattoo conventions a lot for freelance work, and there would be some female specific tattoo conventions, but some women wouldn't do those because for that same reason, they didn't want to be sort of put inside that box. So I kind of understand that you want to kind of prove yourself in the broader world, not just be put in that box. But I think it goes back to what I was saying about kind of tokenism and not wanting to just be a token in a broader world. And it also goes back to like who's the gatekeeper, who are the gatekeepers, and are those people who are in control of the museums and the curatorial, are they equitably inviting women into their spaces? And that's another reason why I feel strongly about women in positions of like power, in the art world or women-owned businesses, because even that sentence coming out of my mouth, it was like, are those people in position who right now are typically male, are they allowing women to show in their spaces? And that's the problem. I find that's the problem, is that a lot of the time the men are the one in the power positions and they're like allowing women or other groups to have a certain amount of visibility, but it's still all predicated on the women and other sort of marginalized groups or underrepresented groups being allowed into those spaces by the people who still actually hold the power. So I don't know if that really answered your question. It's kind of circuitous, but
No, that definitely. And, actually that's part of our history. We started as, a special project of the Royal Photographic Society, right? It was just like a little side venture. And they thought, oh, like, we've done that. We've done women in photography. But us kind of developing as an independent charity was asserting, this is more than just a special little side project. This is something that deserves kind of full and constant attention.
I wonder whether we I wonder whether it's because we think that in some way it is it like a internalized bias from ourselves.
Oh, I was just gonna say that. I'm glad that you're saying
going, hey, I'm a woman and I'm an artist, don't hate me for it. It's sort of, it's like it's I think it's like an internalized bias that we have against ourselves. And so a sort of having a more sort of collective approach and voice, and I mean, even though those voices are all very different, I do think it's important that we and there's nothing wrong with, but I understand it as well, because I do sometimes, it'll be that it's an internalized bias, and I sort of, people will say that certain things about my work, and if they say, oh, your work's very feminine, and then I'm sort of like, well, what do you mean by that? It's really interesting, because you just want your work to be your work, but I'm a woman, I am creating from a female perspective, I can't get away from that.
It also, I mean, for me, I choose not to see being considered as a woman or from a female perspective as being insulting, right? And I think that there is a element, that bias that we're talking about, that little bit of internalized misogyny thing that's going on here, like we're seeing where we stand as being lesser, and we're not. We're coming at this from a position of power, and especially there is definitely a certain amount of optics with us working together that look even better than maybe even we feel like we're organized, right? When we're starting to do these things together and we're starting to get these things from the ground up, this looks really great from the outside. So all we can do is just keep moving, and I'm proud to say that I'm a woman photographer. I'm proud to have that position in the room and to push forward and to prove that my work and the work of our collective, that we're drawing a line in the sand, that this is, we're making important work and we are sticking together, and our work is so important that you should be showing our work in these spaces, or there should be a space for me in the room. And I 100% believe that I'm the kind of person that if you're not going to let me in through the door, I'm going to crash my way in through the window. And so like, that's our energy. Like, we're going to get in these rooms, whether they like it or not. So whether it means that we got to say that we're women photographers or however we got to do it, we're going to figure it out.
I love that, Mara. Thanks.
Yeah, I've had several photographers, yeah, who feel like, is it right to label ourselves as the women photographer? But also, I think a lot of people have mentioned about being so regional, like, oh, I'm a Latin American woman photographer. Like, do we need that region too? Like, what does that mean? You know, giving people labels, or African photographers, or Asia. And I don't know, I always find it like it's also a very personal thing, I think, as well. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I think we've all kind of identified a void that needs to be filled, whether it's like Latin America or women in general, or women within a certain process or geography or what have you. So like, obviously there is space for more representation of female identifying artists if we all and other organizations have identified this kind of void that needs to be filled. I think Chris has a question. So Chris, you should be able to turn on your mic now.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can.
I was just going to say, to Veronica's point when she was talking about, like, do we say things for like Latin American photographers? And I think like what you said, Dale, was really poignant. I think when it comes to there being void, sometimes that label can help so that we can recognize the void. But when it gets overused to the point where I now have representation in that area, and now you're using it to kind of typecast me as, like, say, the Black photographer or the biracial photographer or whatever, I think that's where it becomes problematic, because especially if your work doesn't necessarily address those kind of issues concerning marginalization, now you're just typecasting me, and that's when it becomes tokenism. So I think labels can work in ways that can help make forward movement and forward traction, but it can also be a detriment, as it might keep you in kind of this very like pigeonholed place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Right. And so I guess it's something everyone has to contend with themselves, and also be cognizant of, like, when does it or can it or will it like cross that line? Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That was great.
It's kind of similar to the idea of how labeling yourself as an artist as opposed to a photographer. I mean, I when I speak about myself in my work, I'm an artist first. Like, that's the way that I feel about it. And photography just so happens to be my medium. And if tomorrow I decide that I want to start painting, that's my decision, right? And so I think that these labels and things that we have, I mean, all of it is working towards being able to like organize ourselves in a way that makes some kind of sense, but we just need to make sure that it's working for us and not against us.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, does anybody else in the audience have questions or comments too? Like Chris, that was a great comment. So if anybody else wants to add to the conversation, feel free to put up your hand or even type something into the chat. And while we're waiting for people to do that, actually, if panelists have other women-focused photo organizations that they're sort of keeping an eye on, or they know about that they want to share with people, go ahead and put some links and stuff into the chat.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge WOFA. I think that's how you say them. And by Aldede Delgado. And yeah, she's managed to do some like incredible work in a really short period of time, but part of her whole thing is bringing together all of these different female-led and female-focused organizations from all around the world. So yeah, she's pretty amazing, and then she's creating a great place for people to go and do research to find out about stuff that's going on all around the world. So I just wanted to sort of acknowledge her as a good sort of port of call to you know, to be able to find lots of different organizations.
Can you put that into the chat so people can have something to click on or to jot down?
I threw Sarah Ayers from Patch and Remington Gallery into the chat. She is a curator that I've worked with a lot, and a friend too, but she also is really trying to advocate for women artists and women photographers to be able to push, and especially too, as a woman curator, I think that it's important that we acknowledge where she stands in this whole shenanigans. At the end of the month, I'm doing a talk with her at the Society of Photographic Educator conference in the Midwest for like highlighting urban artists in rural galleries and things like that. So she's really trying to promote and push artists in her space, and I think that it's important for us to talk about her too.
Great. Thank you. I'm like furiously scribbling down some of the stuff that you guys have put in here. We do have a question from Sierra. Has there ever been a time where you had maybe a day job or something that made it difficult to work on your artistic practice? And how did you pull yourself out of that? I'm living that right now, but other people.
Me
please,
too.
Please.
I teach, and so I teach during the day, and then exude all sorts of like artistic energy all day for other people, and then have to come back and try to practice my own. So it is a difficult thing, and the best thing that you can do is have intentionality. I heard from a professor a long time ago that even if you sweep your studio, that still counts as working. Or even if you're just sitting in your studio, it still counts as working, because sometimes you just need to just spin in your chair and think about stuff. So the more often that you put yourself in that artistic location and that space, the more likely you are to create work.
Yeah, I was going to say that sometimes taking like the pressure of productivity, and what productivity actually looks like. Yeah, because my practice is really slow. It just is, and I read a lot, and I think a lot, and I walk, and I look, and and then I make. And so I mean, I am in my studio sort of full time now, but I still need to be connected. I mean, the women in photography, that keeps me connected to a broader community, and my family keeps me connected to the sort of domestic side of my life, and there's inspiration everywhere if you look for it. And sometimes it's like, I remember when I had my second child, like 2 years after my first child, and it was just like I just felt like all I was doing was like nappies and breastfeeding and and all of these kinds of things. And then I realized that whenever I was sat in a chair breastfeeding, looking out of my bedroom window, that there was just all of this stuff happening outside there. So I ended up making a series of work around the people who lived on my street by going into their homes, because I didn't know any of them, and sort of taking my kids with. So it's sort of taking some of the pressure off yourself over what being productive actually is, and what that looks like. I think is my best advice.
Makes me think of all the historical photographers who, weren't well known in their own time and have kind of only subsequently been celebrated. Like, who's the photographer who was a nanny and took photographs while she was minding the kids? Was it Vivian Meyer? But I interviewed Meryl Meisler, a New York photographer, recently, and she was saying that, she took photos for a while as a young person for a newspaper, but then wanted security, so she got a teaching job in New York public schools. But she would take her camera with her to school, and on her walk she would take photographs. And now these photographs are really, really well regarded. And but she was just a school teacher taking photos on her way to work. And I just found that so inspiring, that you don't have to constantly be doing something, just in the quiet moments, the spare moments you might have.
For me, I'm a very slow producer on my own projects, very slow. But then once I get really into an idea, I'm really driven, and I might produce it within a couple of months or maybe in the whole year, but then I just feel it. It's just there really, and I just need to produce it. Whereas like the more sort of curatorial or production side, which I do with Foto Feminas, it's definitely a more proactive, like more constant production. But my own personal work, I have a very slow rhythm, and I feel fine with that. I know when it's there, it's like burning, and I need to do it. And in terms of like when I've been frustrated with work and how that affects me in terms of productivity, I just read. I just need to read and kind of like just, I don't know, liberate, just find another focusing point, and not to carry that with me, because for me, it's just very like a waste of energy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think time management and just figuring out like what your pace is and what you can manage with what you're juggling at any given time. And it can be frustrating. Like my job, some of you know, my job just went full time. So now I feel like I am spending most of my time not doing my photography, which is really frustrating. And who knows how long this full-time thing will last. But there's the balance, right? You get a paycheck, which you can then put into your photography work, or whatever creative endeavor you have going on, or into your nonprofit, or into your business, or what have you. So there's always that trade-off. Just figuring out personally, like I usually work at a very quick pace. I used to work at a lab, and so I was always like processing my own film there and staying all night and printing, and so I'm used to like being constantly working. And the stuff I've been shooting in the last few years isn't like that, and so it's been very difficult for me to like go somewhere and shoot and then maybe not get to the processing and printing for a little while, and then have like that be what I'm doing for this amount of time, and then have another sort of stretch where I'm not in the darkroom and doing stuff every day. And I'll admit, like it's very difficult to adjust to that pace and that workflow, and to not, I'm happiest in the darkroom. So if I could be in the darkroom every day, that would be a dream. So yeah, I think you just have to kind of assess your needs, your artistic needs, and also your time management ability.
I just wanted to say that it took me a while to figure out my rhythm, actually. It wasn't something that I worked out immediately, and I went through a lot of frustration just to, but once I figured it out, like, yeah, it felt like, yeah, like it's okay to take time, but it did take me time. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I found like during the the first lockdowns, when we all had time, and there seemed to be this whole push online to sort of like produce and share and make and I just was not inspired to at all. I just wasn't. And same as Veronica, it's taken me like a good number of years to realize that it's peaks and flows, and ebbs and troughs, and that sometimes I'm super motivated, other times I'm just not. But same as Veronica, I'll read, or I'm always, it's that thing, I now see everything that I do as it in some way feeding into what the work that I'm making, or the project like Women in Photography, or that it's, and if I only produce a single body of work, or not even like a single body of work, I think I've just kind of released myself, because I'm surrounded in where my studio is, there's painters, and they'll maybe only produce 2 paintings in a year, because they'll be so involved. And it's sort of like, why do we feel like we have to be constantly like, I've got this new body of work? That's just taking all of that pressure off yourself. and just sort of really listening to your own rhythm, I think. Yeah.
Well, I
That's
think
a-
rest is an important part of the photographic process as well. And I think that, or just the artistic process in general, like we can't constantly be producing. There has to be ebbs and flows. And when we don't acknowledge that, that's when we get stuck. And then we're like, oh, I have a, I can't make anything, blah, blah, blah. Your body is forcing you to rest. And the second that you do that for a while, you'll be able to come back out of it.
I like that perspective too, like comparing it to other like artistic media. Like the painter may make like 2 paintings a year. So yeah, why do we feel like we have to shoot 100 rolls or 200 rolls of film or sheets or whatever it is, and like keep producing like in mass quantity? I mean, maybe it has to do with the reproductive aspect of photography, but that's a whole nother conversation.
I just want to thank you, Dale, for bringing us all together and having sort of facilitating this conversation and sort of bringing us into each other's communities. That's what we're all really doing, isn't it? So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This
Exactly.
was really great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, right? I mean, collaboration. Also, that's a whole nother conversation, but anyone who's interested in collaborative efforts, cross area shows or other panel discussions or presentations or anything like that, definitely let's talk.
We're definitely interested in that stuff.
Yes,
Cool.
same.
Awesome.
Definitely.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for everyone who came out tonight, and we hope to see you again soon. And thanks to all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
you.
Thank
All
you
right.
everyone for coming out.
Yeah,
night, everybody.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
late for you.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go to sleep, Haley.
Go to sleep.
Yeah.
Bye bye.